So I'm Henry Skerritt. I'm the curator here at Kluge-Ruhe, and I'm going to be one of the moderators today. Our other moderator from the Fralin Museum of Art is Emmy Monaghan, who is one of the curators of the fantastic exhibition Boomalli Prints and Papers, Making Space as an Art Collective. So I'm going to hand over to Emmy now.
Hello, everyone. Before we begin, I wanted to acknowledge that the Kluge-Ruhe and the Fralin are located on the land of the Monacan Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And since we are joining from locations all around the world, I wanted to acknowledge the Indigenous nations where each of us are located. And I encourage you, if you don't know who those Indigenous people are, that you find out and learn about them and their arts and culture. Bronwyn, did you want to do your acknowledgement?
Thanks, Emmy and Henry. Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge the Awaful people of the Bundjalung Nation on which I work and live. And I am a Bundjalung Nation member, but just not from this area, called Cabin Bar, which is known as Byron Bay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, as Henry said before, I am Emmy Monaghan. I was a fourth-year undergraduate student at UVA and a Kluge-Ruhe intern when I co-curated Boomalli Prints and Paper, Making Space as an Art Collective, as part of Professor Douglas Fordham's graduate seminar, Prints and Indigenous Peoples. I've since graduated and am now currently the assistant registrar at the Fralin Museum of Art. I was very honored to be able to work on the exhibition Boomalli Prints and Paper, which is on view at the Kluge-Ruhe through June 19th, 2022. This exhibition celebrates the foundation of the Boomalli Aboriginal Artists Cooperative in 1987, when 10 contemporary artists came together in Sydney to reimagine what it means to be a contemporary and urban Aboriginal artist. Today, Boomalli is still a thriving art cooperative. In its 35-year-long history, Boomalli has supported and made space for many generations of artists. I'm thrilled to be joined here today by two generations of Boomalli artists, founding member Dr. Bronwyn Bancroft and her daughter, Rubyrose Bancroft. As part of the curation process, we were able to speak to 5 of the 10 founding members of Boomalli over Zoom. I was fortunate enough to not only get to speak to Dr. Bronwyn Bancroft during our class, but I also had an additional interview with her to specifically discuss her career in design and her monumental 1987 fashion parade with Euphemia Bostock in Paris. Using the wealth of information that Dr. Bancroft shared with me during our conversations, I wrote an essay for the exhibition catalog titled Clothed in Community, which features some of her original drawings of her Paris designs. If you want to see these amazing images and read more about the exhibition, you can purchase the hardcover catalog in person at the Kluge-Ruhe or online through the UVA Press website. The exhibition and catalog were made possible by the generous support of Australia Council for the Arts and at the University of Virginia by the Mellon Indigenous Arts Initiative and the Mapping Indigenous Worlds Lab, the Department of Art, the Institute for Humanities and Global Cultures, and the Vice Provost for the Arts. I also want to recognize that this exhibition is dedicated to the memory of Aaron Meeks, a founding member of Boomalli who made the exhibition possible through his generous donation of 4 prints to the Kluge-Ruhe. And on that note, I have the pleasure of introducing our 2 very exciting guests, Dr. Bronwyn Bancroft and Rubyrose Bancroft, who are joining us at 9 a.m. their time. So Dr. Bronwyn Bancroft is a proud Bundjalung woman and artist. She was a founding member of the Boomalli Aboriginal Artists Cooperative and is still active in the collective as a volunteer senior strategist. Bronwyn has been exhibiting nationally and internationally for over 3 decades. Bronwyn has illustrated and or written 42 children's books. Bronwyn has been a director of her own company, Designer Aboriginals, since 1985. Bronwyn holds board positions with Australian Indigenous mentoring experience, Australian Society of Authors, and Commonwealth Bank Indigenous Advisory Council. Bronwyn has a Diploma of Visual Arts from Canberra School of Art, 2 master's degrees, one in studio practice and the other in visual art from the University of Sydney. And Bronwyn was awarded her Doctor of Philosophy in 2018 from Western Sydney University. Her work appears in museums and collections across Australia, as well as collections in Germany, Turkey, and the United States. Rubyrose Bancroft is a Bundjalung woman from northern New South Wales. Rubyrose completed her Bachelor of Fine Arts from the National Art School in 2020. Her final work, The Seven Deadly Sins, was acquired for the NAS collection. Rubyrose has exhibited with Boomalli Aboriginal Artists Cooperative and in external exhibitions, including Boomalli Now, MCA Art Bar, and No Show. Rubyrose presented a live art installation for Amnesty International Dadiri exhibition in 2018. Rubyrose has been commissioned to produce unique artwork designs by Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience and Budgie Smuggler Swimwear. Rubyrose was also involved in a project with NRMA, which saw her artwork Ripple Effect 2 featured on a billboard acknowledging Bundjalung country. Bronwyn and Rubyrose, thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning. I'm looking forward to both of your presentations and our conversation afterwards. Once again, the audience is encouraged to type out any questions in the Q&A function while they're presenting, and we will answer as many as we can at the end of the program. So yeah, Bronwyn, please take it away.
No worries, no worries. I just might make a quick amendment there because my last doctorate, I think my supervisor would be very upset with me. He was from Sydney College of the Arts, Sydney University.
Oh.
So as with PhDs, I started the PhD. It took, being a single parent, it took quite a long time to actually finish it. So I started in Western Sydney and finished in Sydney at Sydney University. So, and I had a wonderful supervisor called Brad Buckley. So we used to go hi BB, bye BB.
I got to say, I listened to that and I'm like, Bronwyn, where do you find the time? That's such a, it's such a, I mean, 42 books alone is amazing.
Yeah, I think the books really have been a commitment by me. I grew up in a small, let me start from the beginning. So,
Right.
okay, I'm Bronwyn Bancroft, and I'm working and living on Bundjalung, on land in the Bundjalung Nation. I grew up in a very small country town of 3,000 people called Tenterfield, and when I was growing up in primary school, there were absolutely no resources or children's books or anything that reflected that phrase, if I can't see me, I can't be me. So there was no Aboriginal books there to lead you into an understanding of your culture. It was not embraced in this small country town. So at a very early age, I wanted and committed to doing children's books to fill a void. And yes, since 1992, I got an opportunity to start illustrating. And it's a new field for anyone when they start doing something different. But for me, it's always been a commitment to fill that void for other Aboriginal students and also the wider non-Aboriginal population of children and adults, to bring to life our rich stories and what we have to offer to Australia and further in the world. So the art, creating the books has been a commitment, but illustrating isn't my key passion. I sometimes get so frustrated with doing books if they don't mean anything. And I'm at that point in my life. I'm 64, and I'm like, you know, anything that I do going forward in the children's book literature world will have to be about climate change. It will have to be about issues that are real and relevant in this current world, that our children are being ignored, and it's their future. So that's my commitment that way. I've also volunteered at Boomalli, and I have done since we found a little bit of we almost lost the cooperative, and I just felt, again, another commitment to, in a grassroots manner. I realised what Boomalli gave to me as a young artist, and I was petrified of the idea that other young artists wouldn't be able to have access to not only their community, but to other Aboriginal artists to have a show of strength around their intelligence and their visual strength and their cultural integrity. And so of the last 11 or 12 years I've volunteered there, much to the chagrin of young Ruby, who was constantly having to be hauled to openings and many things. But I am a person that when I'm committed, I find time to do it. So when I was doing the Boomalli, trying to save Boomalli and get a lot of volunteers involved, I would get up at 3 o'clock every morning for almost 4 years and just send thousands of emails and then conduct my artistic career in the rest of the time that I had left over, and then look after my children. And so basically, if I'm committed, I'll lose sleep, but I know that future generations will benefit from this. And I'm a very much a community-oriented person, and I don't believe that you should be paid to cultivate ideas and opportunities for Aboriginal people in this country. That's another commitment. And then my passion, my absolute passion, is painting about my country and having recognition for my old people who, and in that I mean my family lineage, and the amazing stories of fortitude and just sheer courage that they have. And I just love my family, and I love being able to populate the Australian arena with stories about my own specific family. And I'm very lucky to have this amazing connection with all my mob. But in particular, I had a very strong relationship with my Uncle Pat, who was 94 when he died in 2015. And he was a man of few words and strong actions, but taught me to crack a whip, taught me to pan for gold, taught me how to walk around country, taught me how to recognise weather, and just taught me how to sit quietly in our own space. So basically that's the three things that incorporate my creative elements in life. And the first and foremost and integral component about who I am is having 3 children. So I have a son, Jack, I have a daughter, Ella, and I have beautiful Rubyrose, who I had when I was 42. So I left that one a little bit late. But so happy to have these marvellous human beings that actually surrender themselves to put back to make a better community and society. And I'm extremely proud to be their mother. And they're great world citizens, because there's an old story that my friend Femi Bostock's father said, that there are people that are into people power and there are people that are into personal power. And I am a person that is into people power. I believe that the connectivity we have as human beings doesn't belong in a hierarchical paradigm. It actually belongs with each other. And I think that's one of the strengths of my life. That's what I want to, if there's any legacy that I could be known for, it would be the connectivity and ensuring that I populated this earth with really nice humans that actually want to help other people and are extremely creative. We're a very creative family, and that dedication, I think, goes back to my old people, my dad and my uncle and all the other Aboriginal members of my family who have just really inspired me.
Now, Bronwyn, I'm going to share. I'm going to put this PowerPoint on, which is which you've made, because I think that there'll be some some things in here that are going to back up these amazing things that you're saying.
Well, look at us both, Ruby. I love Ruby. That's good. It is good, isn't it? Oh yes, so there's me with short hair. How funny! And this is with long hair. So they're all the founding members, and unfortunately, Michael Riley is deceased, and Arone Raymond Meeks, and I really do have to acknowledge those amazing artists and what friendships we had when we first set up, you know, in 1987. What an incredible bunch of people. I often hear Femi Bostock saying most historians refer to Boomalli as young people, and she said I was 50, Ronnie, when that happened. I also, yes, I do a lot of public artwork. It's a commitment that I've made to do public artwork, and I've done quite a lot. It's an incredibly tricky field to work in. So I've been really lucky in the commissions that I've been able to be offered. And I've recently just finished a major public art commission at Central Railway Station, which is now not embargoed, and was only completed on Friday. Because I now work remotely, I used to live in Sydney for a long time. I now work remotely like a lot of us do because of COVID. And so I'm still able to undertake to do commissions. I'm just doing them in my studio in Byron Bay, in Cavenbar. And so, how are you going there, Henry? And it's very interesting what COVID's done in terms of the ability of the artist to actually just work remotely in their studio, and I think it's actually been good for me. I'm not sure about how anybody else felt about the pandemic, but when it first came to be, I was petrified, you know, because I was like, I don't want to die. And even when Rubyrose came up from finishing her degree at the National Art School, I wouldn't hug her for 2 weeks. It was the most dreadful period and probably one of the worst things I've ever done. But I'm so worried about contracting the COVID. And I suppose most everyone will know all of the people that are in that Boomalli 10 image. It seems like eons ago now, but we are going to celebrate our 35th year this year and have a lot of other artists now. I think we've got like 62 members of Boomalli, which is amazing, and they're all doing really well. And one of the things I love about it is that we work in a fair practice. So none of our artists will be asked to accept less than in terms of remuneration for their art. And we also are very, very keen on excellent copyright protection as well as licensing agreements. We conducted a very thorough licensing agreement that we've excelled at, and that protects our artists and allows them to have the confidence to know that they're being protected by the laws in Australia, but also just having respect for the artist's work. And it has taken a long time for respect to be established in this country, especially for people that come from the state of New South Wales, the Aboriginal people from language groups within New South Wales, being the first colonised state in Australia. And, you know, obviously, you know, I love painting. These are river stones of pocket knives, and that's the river that runs through our country, which is a lifeline for us. We're all currently flooded at the moment. So I have a little place there on the riverbank, and I'm pretty sure that's flooded. And this particular image here is dedicated to my Uncle Pat. It's called Meet Me at the Mountain, and he said, when I die, I'll meet you at the mountain, when you die as well. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold back on that one for a while. But it's also representative of the there's trigonometry stations in our country. And my uncle said, oh, well, you know, these non-Aboriginal, call them white people, but I'll call them non-Aboriginal people. he said, these non-Aboriginal people aren't that dumb. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, they put where we used to put the fires for people to come down the valley, they put the trigonometry stations there. This is my grandmother's country, and we're matrilineal in my country. And this painting came out I was woken one morning at 3 o'clock in my house in Lawson Street, Balmain, and just got up, painted that, went back to bed. She woke me up and said, get up, paint me now. And then I just went back to bed. So I just wanted to show the expansiveness of her love for us. This was a very big painting I did for the Royal North Shore Hospital Atrium. And I was really pleased to do this because a lot of people who go to hospital, and particularly in this country, Australia, Aboriginal people were turned away when they were having babies or when they were sick historically. And a lot of Aboriginal people have fear about going to hospital. So this was a personal undertaking to provide something that was hopefully beautiful and uplifting for people to not be so tentative about wanting to seek medical attention. And that's me working in one of my studios that I had in Balmain before I got a permanent studio at 58 in Byron Bay. So I was pretty excited about having a studio, which people think is automatic, that all artists have studios. And it's like, it's a privilege. I don't come from any privilege. You know, I come from a poor background. And this is the actual earth, wind, fire, water in situ in the Royal North Shore Hospital. And the classic about this is they didn't even invite me to the opening. So I just, it was weird. It was very strange. And as my, you know, it's kind of strange not to be invited to the opening of your own artwork in Australia. So we have a long way to come. I hope I embarrassed them by saying that, because it's pretty offensive. Again, another hospital journey. I love doing hospitals because this one's about palliative care, and it comes from the garden, and then it goes through the journey of life, and then we end up as a star and part of the universe. And when my dad died, he said, don't be sad, Bronwyn, I'll be the first star up every night. I'll always be with you. And I've always carried that story with me. And I do interpret my life stories into these images. And this was gift given. And this is at Temporary Reserve, which is near the airport. But this was a very funny experience because people were like, it's going to get graffiti. And it's really old. Like, it's like 15 years old. Yeah. It's never been graffitied. Never been graffitied. And the local community, which is a very multicultural community, just took it upon themselves to own this, this shed and this space. And this is at a pool where I often used to swim when I lived in Sydney. And I like to work in glass. So these have also been there since for 10 years. Oh my God, that's so long. Weaving's light of light and life. Oh, it's 11 years. Thanks for the maths. And this was one of the first public artworks to go up in this area, which I'm really pleased about, and it's beautiful. Yeah, this was a mural I did for 2019, which was really an acknowledgement of the Gadigal people of the, well, not the Eora Nation, of the original people from the Sydney area. And it's in a local TAFE there, and I just wanted to assert what the land may have looked like and then progress to becoming like skyscrapers and city landscapes. I think I'm getting ready to my time. And this is a work I did for a Seed of Knowledge for Teachers Federation in downtown Sydney, and my beautiful friend Charlene Emson Boyd and the Teachers Federation asked me to do that. And I love anything to do with promoting education, law, understanding of cultural knowledge, acceptance of Aboriginal people as being incredibly great thinkers. And, you know, it's one of the things that I love doing. So I don't do commercial work as such, except for the children's book. So I work in the humanities, education, and, you know, like medical knowledge, etc. And this book just got launched in Byron Bay Cabin Bar on, when was that? Wednesday night, the 6th. And my eldest daughter wrote this book about sun and moon, and it's a lovely book, and she's just got a second contract to write it. A next book with Mugaballa, and Rubyrose is going to be illustrating that. So, like, keep it in the family. I think it's fantastic if you can work with your family, and I don't believe in those things called nepotism, because I think strength comes from family. And family, if you're talented and you're in a family of talented people, then you should explore all of these amazing conduits to allow you to become more confident as a writer or an artist. And this is a book that I did for my son. So Jack wrote a book. Jack is the CEO of the Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience, which works to decrease inequality for Aboriginal people and other nations across the world now. And we've become global. I sit as a director on his board, and it's super exciting to see the challenges that AIM is bringing, but also he's a writer, and he also does art as well. And this is I often work with young, particularly young girls. So one of the first books I did was for Annalise Porter, and I think she was 9 at the time that she wrote the Outback poem. And I like to be able to support new writers to get into talking about just their familial stories, and they don't have to be a traditional story, they just have to be a story that they want to get out there. And this is Coming Home to Country, which is basically a story about going back to my traditional land and what it means to me when I go home and I just get in the water and I listen to the cook. We have huge goannas, and like we have a lot of wildlife there, but you just get a sense of peace when you go home to country, and it's my happy place. So the books are a way of bringing to life real and lived experiences of a person of my generation. I've seen great change, like in my life, and I left school when I was 17 and started my first degree, and I thought that would be my last degree, but because you have a resistance in some areas in Australia, and I'll stop soon, it's very important to like, people do not take you seriously. That's why I've done the 4 degrees, because they cannot refute the fact that you've got 4 degrees. And I love calling myself Dr. Bron. So that's me, I think. That's my time, and it's over to you, Rubyrose.
Thanks. My rap sheet isn't as long as Mum's. Don't have as many accomplishments just yet. But this was my 3rd year major work that I did for art school. I actually did this during COVID. I came up when we were in the peak of the pandemic in Australia, and I stayed with Mum for about, I'd say, 4 months. This is just clay from, the mountains in the background, the actual clay from, I'm pretty sure, the ground and the rocks, and I made these little candles, but it's mainly plasticine. But yeah, it's about a 6-minute long claymation that talks about the 7 deadly sins, which is, a very traditional story about gluttony, lust, it's envy. What else is there? I should know them all. Greed. They'll come to me, but yeah. So I really like taking stories and kind of putting them in my lens. So this is kind of my perception of the 7 deadly sins, because I've been doing this probably since I could talk. Like, I literally, Mum would take me to the art store with her, and the only way she'd get me to shut up was if she bought me colourful things. So when she started buying me the plasticine, I was probably about 8, and I just started making all these claymations, and the people getting out of bed, and like just all these motions. I never actually put it together because I was 8 and I didn't know how to use any computers or anything, but that kind of got the ball rolling, and I really like to go back into my childlike, imagination, and I really like to play on that, and I don't like to make my work to, you know, refine. Like this is very good work for me. This one that I did with the mirror, like I actually did this in Sydney, just finished art school, kind of was going through like a bit of like a blockade after I finished art school, because you create, learn so much, and then you're just kind of like, oh, I've got nothing to do. I'm an artist now. Like I need to actually make art to like make money. And I was really lucky that mum made me a member of Boomalli when I was 18, because to be able to have an income from my art at such a young age, really, this artwork's really funny because I was going through a breakup, if you couldn't tell. But I just thought it was very interesting that at the age of 18, I already was making money, or even before that, when I was 16, I actually got contract with Budgie Smugglers, which is an Australian swimwear company, to do my designs. And they actually had a contract for 6 years, which was some of the best exposure when I was 16, you know, it was great. And I was getting an income, you know, I wasn't working like hospitality or retail or anything. I was just sitting in my room, just creating all these pieces because I had this opportunity through Boomalli. And as mum said, like I grew up there, like I don't know my life without Boomalli. Like there's like a above the studio space, like there's studio space, and then above the studio space before you go into the actual gallery, there was a mezzanine. And I remember all the artworks, like Euphemia Bostock, like Jeffrey Samuels, like everyone's like artworks would just be up there, and I would spend hours just like in this imaginary world, just kind of like keeping myself busy, but not knowing that I'm like surrounded by like some of the most amazing work by some of the most amazing Aboriginal artists of New South Wales. And it's just like, you know, you take it for granted. Like I would yell to mum being like, no Boomalli, like I hate it there, it's so boring. And you know, and now I've got my work being put in shows, and I'm like, they're like, oh, your work's in a show, and I'm like, oh, that's great, didn't even know, you know, like I'm getting so much exposure, and I really like, I'm so grateful for it. But yeah, a lot of my work is influenced by fairy tales. You know, my favorite movie as a kid growing up was Fantasia, the 1950 version. I would watch that on repeat, and I think that really, you know, sparked something in me. And you know, there is a guy that passed, Ralph Bashki, I think I'm pronouncing that right. He did all these animations in the 70s, like Wizards, the original Lord of the Rings. You know, he was a Jewish man, and he put a lot of that into his work, you know, with also this rough edge. And like, I think the aspect that really grabbed me was the fact that, you know, he was able to put these really, really intense, dark ideas and stories, but it was shrouded and covered by, you know, fairies. And you know, because Wizards, for example, which is probably one of my favorite movies, is made in 1977, and it follows two brothers, but it's based along the Holocaust. And you know, one brother is evil and one is good, and he has this projector, and he projects, you know, these like you know, all this stuff that represents like anti-Semitic behavior and all this stuff, but it's so like kind of blurred by the beautiful drawings, because it's amazing animation. And I think that's what really catches me. Like this one I actually did in my room. This is meant to represent like, you know, like being stuck in your space, especially during COVID. I feel like everyone would understand that. And actually seeing the beauty in your space and the colors, and you know, like everything around us is art. Like especially I moved up to the Northern Rivers probably about a year ago, and I've seen, you know, more beautiful wildlife and more things that inspire me every single day, just because I take that moment to look at it. And I think if I didn't have art at such a young age, or be around art, or, you know, be dragged into these things by mum, I think I wouldn't look at the world the way I do and be able to produce art the way I do. And it's also like I have severe anxiety. I suffered like my whole life, especially through high school. That was a really hard time for me. And I found patterns, like this type of pattern work that I did was very much from like 16 to probably 20. I just couldn't put a pen down, and this repetitive pattern work was actually like a way for me to actually calm my brain and actually calm my thoughts, and not, you know, when you get those intrusive thoughts and stuff, like being able to just focus and like people always ask me every single day, they're like, how do you have the patience to sit there and actually draw that? And it's just the only thing that will quiet my mind. So I'm like, of course I'm going to sit there and do it for 2 hours. It's like, got nothing else to do, you know? So yeah, I think that's a bit of it. And I remember a lot people asking me when I was younger, like if mum's work ever inspired me. And I would always be like, no, like never, like I'm my own individual. But working for her as a studio assistant for maybe the last 10 months, and even just, you know, mum had me check her paintings at the age of 8 to see if she had all the colors correct and stuff. Like I've been probably studio assistanting since I was like 12 or something, like so. But I've noticed that I actually have subconsciously taken a lot of influence from my mother, just from colors, from, you know, the way that I want to lay something out, you know, the way I think about something, the relationship of like space and everything. Like I definitely think growing up with a house like full of color, like this is not normal. Like mum didn't have a studio, like she painted in the lounge room. Like this is what I lived with like all the time. So it's like I really appreciate it, and it's really made me the person that I am and the artist that I am today. So yeah, like, thanks.
That was amazing, and the kind of quick fire 30-second grab on every painting was like, I was like, oh my gosh, it actually is kind of like seeing your life flashing before your eyes. But amazing just amazing work. And I was really glad that you kind of came back to that question of family, because it sheds light on an artist's practice in a way that you don't often get from hearing an artist, is hearing the artist's family talk about their work. So I think now we're at the really exciting part, which is where we get to pepper you with questions. Emmy, I'm going to let you get the ball rolling. Do you have a question that you want to ask first?
Yeah, I think Bronwyn, you really addressed this, but I wanted to hear Rubyrose speak more about how like family has really impacted your artistic practice. Maybe like how like Bronwyn was talking about how she's worked with your other siblings, but maybe talk about how your relationship with her siblings as well.
Well, I think my brother also, you know, got the foot in the door with me. I did the cover of his book that he, when did he?
8 years ago.
Yeah, like 8 years ago. I've been commissioned to do work for AIM, like since I can remember, and, you know, walking around, like when I lived in Sydney especially, like it's really funny, like walking around and then you see someone with your artwork, just walk past you and you're like, oh, that's very funny. And then he's always given me that outlet to explore my work and kind of give me that platform that he's been able to create with AIM. But then it's very funny because both my siblings are very similar, but also very different. They're Geminis. But my sister is very, like, she nurtures like your creativity inside, and kind of like my brother will give you the platform and my sister will also give you a platform, but she wants to like know like the root down chords. Like I remember when I was 16 and she was like, why don't you paint on me? And I remember I painted her whole body in patterns, and then it clicked something in my brain, and then I painted like 8 different people with all different colors, and then I created like photoshopped prints, and then I actually have some on the catalogue of Boomalli. But you know, her just wanting to play with paint caused like a snowball effect, and I think that's just what our family does. Like we just throw ideas out there, and then someone will grab it and be like, oh, that's actually really good, I'm gonna do it first. Like we're all very competitive as well, like, you know, first in, best dressed.
So I want to ask you about Boomalli, because Bronwyn, one of the things doing this project was it was all about why Boomalli was founded, right? And I was wondering, first, it'd be great to kind of get you to kind of just do the quick recap on why Boomalli was necessary in 1987. But also, I want to ask this question to both of you: why is it still relevant? What are the things that have changed in that time, and what are the ways in which the organization has changed to meet those, and how has it sort of stayed a really important part of the community, because it is.
That's a lot in one question, Henry. Thank you.
It is, but I've got a lot in there. I'm trying to make the most of having you here.
I could tell. Well, initially, I think that the what comes to mind, and I think all of the founding members always assert this, is that Michael Riley had the seed of an idea to actually bring our art, because a lot of us had been to art school and a lot of us hadn't. So it was about, like, why weren't we being accepted as Aboriginal artists? Like, there was like traditional art, and then there was like us. Who are you? Oh, you're not really Aboriginal artists. Like, you live in a city, you are urban dwellers. There were just some very, kind of crazy assertions back at us. So we basically, the really formative thing that's changed a lot is that the organisation was really only for 10 people, which seems ridiculous now that we have 60 members. When we set up, we were very committed to each other. We were hanging our own shows, we were doing our own publicity. We'd ask people to open the shows. It was incredibly individual commitment for a collegiate moment. And when I think what really happened, and I sort of investigated this in my PhD, a chapter around Boomalli, was that as soon as the demand started to come to the foremost for our art, we realized that we needed administrators, and that we'd set up this like kind of incredible sort of company of Boomalli artists, and it was like it just suddenly got too big, too demanding, and I think we frayed. I think like someone like me, I had 2 small children. My marriage had dissolved in that process, and it was just difficult, and so I had to sort of move away a little bit. But I always maintained, a connection with Boomalli, and I think, and a lot of us have moved away and still stay connected. I think the relevance of Boomalli now is primarily about protecting and asserting the integrity and the creativity and the ingeniousness of many Aboriginal artists. So it's not like we can be seen in an elitist way, which to me is an anathema. I never want to be seen as an elite artist. So in many ways, I'm not personally someone who will promote themselves over the collective. And I believe that the frameworks which we work in sometimes demand us to move away from our community and family to embrace the elitism of what it is to be a successful artist. And we have had great success, but I will say that a lot of our success came from external places, like from overseas, and that really shone a light back in on Australia, and our acceptance really was accelerated by more external observers and other institutions who actually accepted and respected us straight away. And that was something that I really, really, over the maturation of time, I've seen that as being an incredible moment for us as Boomalli artists to leverage the art world. That's my take. Your take?
No.
Well, you're young. So.
What you
Yeah,
think?
Ruby. So what is the purpose of Boomalli for younger artists today?
I think, yeah, just expose, or like also, I think you go into art school thinking that you're going to learn absolutely everything about how to do everything about an artist, like, you know, but you actually come out and go, how do I want to market like, I'm not, you know, my own business. I have to learn how to market myself. Like, I've got to be, you know, in art school you're told you've got to appease to the audience of some aspect, or, you know, like, have this thing, like, that's what I was taught. But being at Boomalli and being in the space and having, you know, all these different people, you know, the oldest member is Amy, the oldest member?
Yeah, she's 86.
Yeah, you know, so I'm turning 23 this year, and the oldest member is 87?
86.
86, sorry. Don't want to add any more years. And, you know, being able to be in that space with her and actually, like, you know, I did my year 12 Aboriginal Studies like elective on Aaron Meeks and Jeffrey Samuels and Euphemia Bostock, because I knew that, you know, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get that information out there, but I only knew that because I was going to Boomalli and I was around their art, and, you know, Mum was telling me stuff that maybe I didn't want to hear, but it's stuck in my brain now. Like, you know, she chatted my ear off, and now I have all this information, all this art information, and I think I wouldn't have been able to get that from Boomalli. And I think also having, you know, the volunteers and the people that work there actually, like, help me. Like, you know, I can send an email to Laura at Boomalli and be like, hey, I just got this, blah, 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 this job, what do I do, copyright, like, what should I do about it? And she will come back with all the info, what's the best situation for me, you know? And I think having that has really pushed me forward. I mean, having my mother really helped as well, but I think having that, especially when I got out of art school, really pushed me, because I think if I didn't have Boomalli, I don't think I would know how to market my work or get it out there or get any of the opportunities that I had. So I think that me as a young emerging artist, it has been one of the most helpful things ever. And like, my sister is a member, her partner's a member, you know, and we'll always be like, oh, we just sold a painting. We'll be like, when? Boomalli, you know, because they're constantly working, like, they're constantly like, you know, we can, like, I can be in Mum's studio and I can work on a painting and just send it down. And I know that Boomalli has the best interest to sell that work and to get me out there. So it's like, you know, it takes a little bit of stress off me, which is kind of good. And I can be creative and not have to think about all the aspects of being an artist, because it's not just making art. Like, 50% of it is really tricky. And like, you know, if I am just so grateful to have Boomalli and my mum. So yeah, they've been really helpful.
And how do you know, 60 artists is a lot of artists. How do artists become a member of Boomalli? What's the process for that?
Well, the artists have to put in a CV, and it goes to the board. So we have a board. We have 2 non-Aboriginal members, directors who have expertise, and that was developed when we had the calamity and we almost lost the cooperative. So we have 2 senior directors who have expertise in financial literacy and have been involved in, you know, galleries or large corporations. And then they nominate to come to us and we accept it as a board. They can't vote on any of the decisions pertaining to any of the directions of Boomalli, but they're there for their expertise. And then there are Aboriginal directors who are nominated, and Femi's been the chairperson for a long time, and Jeffrey Samuels has just taken up the chairpersonship. And those directors vote on the submissions of the artists. So they've got to put in a visual portfolio, they have to put in a CV, and they have to also show that they're committed to their artistic practice and show that to the board, and then the board accepts them. So that's the procedure for becoming a member.
Wow.
I wanted to ask you guys about fashion, because that's what we've talked about a lot before, Bronwyn. And from what I understood from those conversations was that when you first started designing, it was kind of more like a practical approach to like having clothes that you could have control over, but eventually turned into a way to like engage with the urban Aboriginal community in Sydney. And Rubyrose, you also talked about how you had been designing clothing. So I was hoping you guys could talk about your like individual engagements with fashion and creating visibility for Indigenous culture in Australia.
Um, I think for me, look, my mum was a dressmaker, and my father was a sleeper cutter, the person who makes sleepers for railways, bits of wood for railway lines to go over. I couldn't afford clothing. So basically, I started making my own clothing. So I'd go to Vinnie's and buy a bedspread or a fantastic piece of curtain material, and I'd start to make my own clothes. Out of that, I grew a relationship with a friend called Jo Fapey, who ended up doing pattern making. But from a very young age, I've always decorated my own clothing. I've always wanted to be different, because I am. And we all are, by the way. We're all unique. And I just wanted to have my own fashion. I've never been, and actually I've been an upcycler since, the late 70s. So something that's seemingly become a fashionable thing now was something I was doing in the 70s. And I've been constantly, when I started my shop in 1985, it was really to show people that Aboriginal designers and artists were like creating great stuff. And I believe in the integrity of our creativity, and I wanted to show that. In 1991, my relationship and marriage with my husband dissolved, and so that's when I decided to become a full-time artist with as a single parent, 2 children. So always been brave, always been courageous, and I never feel as if I'm ever going to fail, even though I felt that, because I believe that my old people have put me on this planet to fulfill an obligation that they were unable to, due to the restraints of racism in this country and the lack of opportunity. Okay.
Well, I just, make the design and then they make the clothes. But what I think I really like about the fashion is the fact that when I look at my art, I know that the person that's looking at it isn't the first thought going, oh, that's traditional Aboriginal art, because there is a stereotype of, dot paintings and, the warm, neutral earthy colors, and that's what people want. Like a lot of companies will want that aesthetic and stuff. And I think, it doesn't matter what you make, it matters who you are and how you produce it. And I think when I look at my art, it's influenced by mum's art and, like some art, I can see that I'm influenced by songlines and tradition and growing up on country and stuff like that. But that's for me and whoever can see that. But it's my beautiful, colourful way that I want to show it. So I think it's a kind of contemporary way of Indigenous art, because I think as a young person as well, who's grown up and known about my mum and, the racism that she's endured and, people's telling her that, oh, you're not Indigenous, you're European, you're white, like, you're not black, like, you're not in the mid, like, in Uluru, like, dot painting, so you can't be, like, Indigenous. And I think that really needs to be, like, pushed, like, completely out of the way and shown that it doesn't matter what color you are, what art you make, like, connection to country and, your identity is all that matters. And I think that's what I like to portray in my beautiful, colorful way on clothes. So yeah.
Though I was just thinking, Bronwyn, I mean, for somebody who, as you said at the beginning, you're very passionate about painting, but you've had your work has has moved into so many different avenues, that in public art, in fashion, in books. And I wonder, like, is some of that really about reasserting presence in these spaces, in the public spaces, and keeping, you know, I look at those hospital things and think, you know, that for so many people, that's a real eye-opener of thinking there is an Indigenous presence in these places. Is that part of the motivation for the sort of breadth of your practice?
Absolutely. I think that to be able to assert, like I said, if I can't see me, I can't be me. For us, and there is a resistance, and Australians need to address the inconsistencies around how they actually argue race relations in this country. You know, we have over 500 people have died in custody. You know, our incarceration rates for youth are incredibly amplified. Racism by the police, the government, the school system. These are inherently there, and Australians need to have a very mature approach about how we're going to tackle racism in this country. So for me, the amplification of my work in this space is about grounding Australians back into an understanding that this is Aboriginal land, always was, always will be. And the ramifications of the historical colonisation frameworks that have imprisoned, and in the case of our family, where, you know, our old people were massacred by the landowner, and I'm currently on a state library fellowship to, you know, actually go in and explore what this non-Aboriginal person was that was given 38,000 hectares of our country by his brother, who was a magistrate. For me, it's not about creating a new scar for the wider audience. It's actually about attending to the healing of that scar and making sure that wound closes once and for all through greater understanding and amplification of what actually happened to our people in this country. And that's going to be my lifelong journey around a broader context of actually getting people to have a greater awareness.
That has a very difficult balancing act in it, though, I imagine, because I look at a work, you know, your work has not, it has often been biting. You know, it has, we've got a beautiful work in the exhibition at the moment, Treaty. I mean, that's not holding any punches, but you've also done works that are, you know, much more. I mean, I look at the hospital works and think, you know, the comments that you made about them trying to be welcoming and trying to be so. Is that a balancing act that you're, you know, constantly thinking through? When to bite and when to embrace?
Oh, I just think you bite when you're pissed off. You know, like I create works when I'm really. You know, I did a work called You Don't Even Look Aboriginal, which the Art Gallery in New South Wales purchased a very long time ago when Daphne Wallace was the curator. And I was attacked by this woman, very, very hostile middle-aged woman. And I'm not ageist, but she really went for me. And I was like, holy cow, what are you doing? And it was so confronting that night I just went home and did the work. I mean, I just went home and created that work that night. And I was like, who are you to call me out? Like, you don't, like, you may not even know who you are. Anyway, as a result of that, I suspended the class that I was conducting. And then I said, well, come back and we'll deal with this racist right here, right now. And we did. And I said to the class, you know, I had about 50 kids there. I said, anybody got a copy of My Place by Sally Morgan? Someone did. Then what happened as an element of that was that these kids wrote me a 10-page letter about how they'd helped the racist, how they were taking her aside, doing cultural awareness, they were giving her books, they were trying to make her explore her attitude and why she attacked me. And so what happens for me is that I love painting beautiful things, and I make no apology for that. I love colour, and I'm in love with colour, and it's something that makes me feel good when I'm dealing with bad times. But when I'm cranky or intolerant of other people's behavior, I will create work that, yeah, it's like, yes, it can be biting, and I'm happy to have those works in my repertoire. If that answers your question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. I mean, I think that I like that animation in your work, right? Like that it can occupy both of those spaces quite powerfully.
Happy that you mentioned Euphemia again, because I wanted to ask about her and your relationship with her, and also just you know, she's one of the artists in the exhibition, and you knew her before Boomalli, and she was kind of the person who introduced you to some of the other artists who founded Boomalli. So could you talk a little bit about her, and then also just like forming relationships within Boomalli and like the Aboriginal community in Sydney?
Okay, there's 4 things there you've asked me. Femi is, we always find it very difficult to describe our relationship, because she's like a mom, a mate, a friend, a sister, a co-artist. We went to Paris together. We met, you know, prior, when I started my shop, Designer Aboriginals, and Feme was like, oh my God, who is that woman with that really loud mouth? And it was me. So we she's like, oh gosh, you know, I have to hang around with her. And it was so hilarious. When we went to Paris together, we had to stay in the same tenement place in Paris, and it was 3 weeks, and we just realized that we were like the most amazing kindred spirits. And her 2 daughters say that I'm the real daughter, because we have so many similarities. Like, we love to yarn, we like to be nice to people, we're also very sort of blunt when people are mean to other people, and we just love our community and our family. You know, our family is our community. And so when Feme took me in to meet the other mob, we just sort of like having cups of tea at other people's places, and then we decided to do the first Boomalli show, and that's how we got the first 10. I mean, you know, like, they were pulling people in at the last minute, and I think Brenda came in and she was the last person to be the 10th, and I think Cheryl Connor's Parnell was 11 and Joe Croft was 12, but because we'd already done the cut and had the first exhibition, it was like the Boomalli 10. And I think the Aboriginal community in Sydney has been very supportive of Boomalli. And I particularly think of like someone like Lola Forrester, who runs the Gadigal radio station. You know, she's a commentator and journalist, and she's been so supportive to get our words out and our shows out. And we have a very collegiate, you know, population there, and obviously people moving in and out of Sydney constantly, because it's like one of those ebb and flow places. It's a very large city, you know, and I think Boomalli ends up being a bit of a magnet for people to still go to, even though we're in Leichhardt. But currently, Kairos Singh, who's our curator, has just done this beautiful exhibition at 107 Projects in Redfern called Congregate, and it's about, you know, Redfern being the place that all Aboriginal people would go to from across Australia to congregate. And I sort of had a cheeky suggestion and said, why don't you get the Paris Cape out of the Powerhouse Museum and exhibit it in Redfern, because it actually was part of the Aboriginal Medical Service there that when we went to Redfern and when we went to Paris, and she got it. So this sort of museum quality Cape Paris collection piece is now in an exhibition in Redfern, which I absolutely love. And I'm so proud of the Powerhouse actually releasing it to let it go there. Like, those, you know what curators are like around collections, and it was pretty epic that they said yes. So I'm super stoked. Yeah. Did that answer your question, Andy?
I think that was a great answer. All right, I'm going to put you guys on the spot and ask this really difficult question. I mean, I really want to encourage the audience to ask questions too. So I'm going to get you to do the that do the artist critique. So Ruby, I'm going to get you to go first. What do you think people don't know about your mum's art that you think they should know?
I don't know if what I want to say is I can say it, but I don't know, I think, I don't think people really see the dedication that my mom, like, people go, wow, that takes a lot of work. But until you sit in this studio space and you're seeing, this, what did I say that? Yes, 64-year-old lady, she's not very, like, as young as she used to be, and she's pulling out these canvases that are literally twice her height and dragging them onto these massive tables and painting from 3 o'clock in the morning until like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, she doesn't stop. Like, that's the thing I think people don't know about my mom is, like, once she starts, like, she cannot stop. Like, this is, like, I would say to both of us, I think this is also, like, kind of like a drug to us. Like, the more we paint, the more you want to keep doing it, and the more you have ideas, and it just keeps flowing. And I think, people go, oh, wow, Bronwyn, like, you're very established, been doing this, like, 50 plus years, blah, blah, blah. But, like, when you actually come into the space and, and I have to mix her paint. She is working with over 100 colors for literally just one painting, and it's, like, constant variations, and she knows the exact colors. Like, if I am slightly too warm in the yellow, she knows. Like, she's just, this is just her craft, and she's been doing it so long. That's all I can say.
I think that's a great answer. I mean, I think that I think a lot of people will look at the precision in the work. You can see that precision and care. It's a good thing to draw attention to. Okay, Bronwyn, what would you like people to see in Ruby's work? What are the things about her work that excite you?
I think what excites me is that I think she's, incredibly ingenious from her viewpoint. I mean, I remember her as a little girl discovering the computer, and because literally her brother and sister, like Jack's 37 and Ella's 33, so Rubes is 23 this year. So there was that age gap, and so Rubes basically grew up with me because they were going to uni and doing their careers and stuff like that. So she would amuse herself while I was painting, and she'd get on the computer and I'd have to do things like, she'd be the journalist, and she'd be like, and she loves Americans. She said, oh my God, I hope I don't lapse into an American accent, Mum, because she's always mimicking people. That one of the things that I love about her creativity that I don't think people know is that from a very early age, she was not only making these amazing installations, but she was also covering weather reports and being a journalist and creating little video clips and just being a performative person in terms of creativity, which, you wouldn't want many people to know. And I think resilience is, and that's a really overrated word because we're currently in floods at the moment and they're calling everyone resilient, and it kind of drives me nuts. But Rubes has had a lot of sort of issues around being able to bring her art through as a meditative and healing journey. And I think for a mother, I can see this deep resonance that only comes from pain that brings this amazing work to the fore. And I'm excited. I mean, I just want to live long enough to be able to see the maturation of the work. And like, I know that we all dismiss our early work as like, oh, that was crap or whatever, but it's a foundational moment. All of the work that you're doing is about gravitating to the, just accelerate your expertise and your skills. So I find the most exciting thing about Ruby's work is the emotion that's in the work, is her high skill level, which she works really hard at, and then the lens that she looks through comes from a young woman who would like to explore the performative in a visual context. And I just love that about her work. And I'm really excited as an artist, not just because Ruby's my daughter, but because I think she brings a different vision to our world. And I love the way she thinks. It's quite great.
From the very get-go this evening, from the first things you said, Bronwyn, I just thought, gee, I really hope that I'm going to be able to look back at my children and say those wonderful things that you have said about your children, because it really does. It really brings to light why a program like this is important, right? That the ways in which families bring exciting things to the table for each other and support. And it's just been such a absolute honor and privilege that you've let us all into that, because it's really heartwarming and just I can't thank you enough. It has been such an absolute pleasure having you both here tonight.
To everyone who took the time out to sit and participate in the forum, and thank you, Kluge-Ruhe, and particularly Henry and Emmy for organising it. It's just been great. You're all very professional. It's just been a pleasure to be a part of this webinar. See? The first webinar. What she said.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.